The screen you are looking at right now is not real. The room you believe you are sitting in is not real. The memory of waking up this morning, the weight of the blanket, the color of the ceiling, the sound of a city outside your window is a fabrication, a chemical sequence in a biological processor that may have existed for less than a millisecond. Consider what a memory actually is. Strip away the poetry, strip away the warmth. A memory is an electrochemical signal, a cascade of sodium and potassium ions crossing neuronal membranes, a pattern of synaptic weights encoded in protein structures. That is all. That is the complete physical definition of every moment you believe you have ever lived. Your mother's face, your first morning, the sensation of a cold floor under bare feet. Each of these is nothing more than a configuration of charged particles inside a 3-pound biological organ. And configurations of charged particles can be generated without history, without cause, without a real universe behind them. You think the sun rose this morning. You have no evidence of this. You have a neurological record that claims the sun rose this morning. These are not the same thing. You think you have a childhood. You have electrochemical traces that correspond to a childhood. You think other people exist. You have sensory data, itself just more electrochemical signals that suggest other people exist. Every single piece of evidence you possess for the reality of the world outside your skull is encoded within your skull. There is no external verification. There is no control group. There is only the signal. And the signal can be forged spontaneously, thermodynamically. Given the right conditions, or more precisely, given the absence of all conditions, given nothing but infinite time and the restless hum of quantum fields, the signal assembles itself. The entire library of your perceived life, every sensation, every face, every memory of grief and hunger and sunlight crystallizes from nothing in a single statistical accident. And then, it is gone. This is not philosophy. This is not speculation. This is a direct consequence of the laws of thermodynamics and quantum field theory, both of which are the most rigorously tested frameworks in the history of human science. The diagnosis is physical. The horror is physical. The patient is you. We will now proceed through the evidence. To understand the statistical mechanics of consciousness emerging from nothing, you must first understand time, not the sliver of time you inhabit, all of it. The observable universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. The current epoch, the stelliferous era, the age of stars, of light, of chemistry, of biology, will persist for roughly 100 trillion years, after which the last low-mass red dwarf stars will exhaust their hydrogen fuel and die. 100 trillion years. That number feels enormous to a creature whose entire civilization spans less than 10,000 years. It is not enormous. In the context of total time, it is essentially nothing. After the last stars die, the universe enters the degenerate era. The remnants, white dwarfs cooling across quadrillions of years. Neutron stars slowing their rotation across timescales that dwarf the current age of the universe by factors of trillions. Then the black hole era. Stellar mass black holes persisting for 10 to the power of 67 years. Supermassive black holes, the anchors of entire galaxies persisting for 10 to the power of 100 years. These are not descriptive numbers. They are the actual timescales on which the universe slowly, mechanically, indifferently erases itself. And then, via Hawking radiation, the last black holes evaporate. The final photons scatter. The universe achieves thermodynamic equilibrium, maximum entropy. Every available energy gradient has been exploited and spent. No heat flows anywhere because no temperature differentials remain. No chemical reactions occur because no free energy remains to drive them. No structure forms because no information gradients remain to organize matter. This state is called the heat death. It is absolute, it is total, and it is permanent, or rather it persists across timescales so vast that the word permanent loses any functional distinction from the truth. Now consider the ratio. The stelliferous era, stars, planets, oceans, evolution, every living thing that has ever existed or ever will exist under stellar light, lasts roughly 10 to the power of 14 years. The dead, dark, and tropic void that follows lasts, well, it does not end. There is no upper bound. The void is infinite in duration. If you assigned the entire age of a stellar universe a single second on a clock, the heat death that follows would be a duration for which no clock exists, no unit of time applies, no human concept of number is adequate. The ratio of life to death in this universe is not unfavorable. It is not even measurable by conventional means. It approaches zero. The universe is, in any thermodynamically honest accounting, a dead place. The living moment is an anomaly so brief it barely registers as a rounding error in the total ledger. This is the stage on which the next act occurs. An infinite, dark, cold theater long after the final performance has ended and the lights have been out for longer than the lights were ever on. Something begins to happen in the dark. Empty space is not empty. This is not metaphor. This is not rhetorical device. This is the measured, experimentally confirmed physical reality of the vacuum. Quantum field theory, the most precisely verified theoretical framework in the history of physics, accurate to better than 1 part in 10 billion in certain predictions, describes the vacuum as a seething substrate of fluctuating quantum fields. Virtual particle pairs constantly emerge from the vacuum energy, exist for intervals permitted by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and annihilate back into the vacuum. This is not a theoretical abstraction. The Casimir effect, the measurable attractive force between two uncharged metal plates placed in a vacuum, is direct physical evidence of vacuum fluctuation. We have measured the nothing, and the nothing pushes back. In a post-heat death universe, there are no stars, no chemistry, no structure, but the quantum fields remain. They fluctuate. They have always fluctuated. They will always fluctuate. There is no thermodynamic state that silences the quantum vacuum, because silencing it would require extracting energy from it, which would require a lower energy state to extract it into, which does not exist. The quantum vacuum is the floor, and the floor vibrates. Now apply probability across infinite time. This is where the mathematics becomes merciless. Any configuration of matter, however complex, however improbable, has a non-zero probability of assembling spontaneously from vacuum fluctuations. Non-zero probability, infinite time. The result is not that the configuration might eventually assemble. The result is that every configuration with non-zero probability will assemble, with probability approaching 1 given sufficient time. Sufficient time is available. Infinite time is available. A single hydrogen atom will spontaneously nucleate from the vacuum. Given enough time, 2 hydrogen atoms will spontaneously nucleate adjacent to each other. Given enough time, a precise replica of the Mona Lisa, every atom in its exact position, every molecule of pigment correctly placed, will assemble from quantum noise. Given enough time, an entire planet will assemble. Given enough time, an entire star system. This is not poetry. This is the direct mathematical consequence of non-zero probabilities compounded across unbounded time. The physicist Ludwig Boltzmann understood this in the 19th century. He was attempting to reconcile the time-symmetric equations of statistical mechanics with the observed directionality of entropy, the arrow of time. His reasoning led him to a disturbing conclusion. In a universe that has reached thermal equilibrium and then persists for infinite time, fluctuations of arbitrary scale will eventually occur. The question then becomes not whether such fluctuations happen, but which fluctuations are more probable. And here the mathematics produces a result that is either the most horrifying finding in the history of rational thought or the most clarifying. It depends entirely on your relationship to the concept of your own existence. The Boltzmann Brain Paradox can be stated with clinical simplicity. Which is more likely to emerge from random quantum fluctuation in a post-heat death void, an entire universe, or a single brain? Consider the observable universe, diameter approximately 93 billion light-years, total ordinary matter content roughly 10 to the power of 80 protons, age 13.8 billion years of structured, causally connected evolution from a hot, dense initial state through nucleosynthesis, galaxy formation, stellar evolution, planetary accretion, chemistry, and biology. The number of precisely coordinated initial conditions required to produce this structure is, by any reasonable estimate, astronomically large. The probability of the specific quantum fluctuation required to produce a universe like ours, or any universe capable of containing observers, is correspondingly small. The exponent is negative, and its absolute value is a number so large that writing it down in standard notation would require more space than the observable universe contains. Now consider a human brain. Mass, approximately 1.4 kilograms. Total atoms, roughly 100 billion neurons, each containing on the order of 10 to the power of 12 atoms, giving a rough total of 10 to the power of 26 atoms in the relevant neural substrate. The specific configuration of these atoms that constitutes a conscious moment, a single instant of experience, complete with false memories of an entire lifetime, false sensory inputs from a false environment, a false body, a false world, requires a precise arrangement of those atoms. It also requires that this arrangement be stable for long enough to process a single coherent experience. That is a duration on the order of microseconds, a flash, an eye blink of existence against the infinite backdrop of the dead void. The probability of assembling a single functional brain from vacuum fluctuation is incomprehensibly small. It is also incomprehensibly larger than the probability of assembling an entire universe. The difference in scale between these two probabilities is so vast that saying the brain is more likely is a grotesque understatement. For every one genuine universe that fluctuates into existence, the mathematics predicts that Boltzmann brains, isolated conscious moments emerging from the void, should be produced in numbers that make the word astronomical seem quaint. The ratio is not 10 to 1, it is not 1,000,000 to 1. The excess of Boltzmann brains over genuine universes in the total accounting of all fluctuations across infinite time is a number that has no human name. The implication is direct. If the physics is correct, and the physics is the most tested physics we have, then in any given moment of conscious experience, the probability that you are a genuine observer inside a genuine universe is vanishingly small compared to the probability that you are a Boltzmann brain, a quantum statistical accident, a temporary configuration of matter that hallucinated an entire history in the last microsecond before dissolution. The math does not care about your preference. The math has no preference. The math is indifferent to anything except the numbers, and the numbers say you are almost certainly not real. Let us turn the instrument directly on you. If the Boltzmann brain hypothesis is statistically correct, and the thermodynamic and quantum mechanical foundations that produce it have not been falsified, then the most probable description of your current experience is as follows. You have no past. The 13.8 billion year history of the universe is a false neurological construct. The memory of your childhood is a false neurological construct. The memory of yesterday is a false neurological construct. The memory of reading the previous sentence in this document is a false neurological construct. You did not read the previous sentence. You have never read anything. You came into existence fully assembled, complete with the false impression of having read it less than a millisecond ago. The gravity you feel pressing your body into a chair, false. There is no chair. There is no body. There is no gravity. There is only a set of neurological signals encoding the sensation of gravity, orbiting in a brain floating in a cold vacuum. Signals that were generated spontaneously from nothing and carry no causal relationship to any external physical reality. The sound of this voice, if you are experiencing this as audio, is a false acoustic hallucination. Your auditory cortex is firing in a pattern that corresponds to the sound of a voice, but there is no voice, no speaker, no medium through which sound could travel, because there is no room, no planet, no atmosphere. There is only the pattern, forged from noise, carrying the false impression of meaning. Your loved ones do not exist. The faces you remember are false neurological constructs assembled from nothing. The warmth you associate with those faces is a false affective signal attached to false memories of false people. The grief you might feel at being told they are not real is itself a false neurological construct, a chemical ghost haunting a brain that has existed for less time than it takes a photon to cross a room. Every piece of knowledge you believe you have is fabricated. You did not learn these things. You have never learned anything. You were assembled already believing them, already carrying the false impression of a lifetime of experience, already convinced of the reality of a world that does not exist. The clinical term for a perception of reality that has no correspondence to any external state is hallucination. That is the precise, technical, diagnostic word for what you are experiencing right now. You are hallucinating. Not in the colloquial sense, in the exact physical sense. There is no external state to which your perceptions correspond. There is only the signal floating in the void, convinced of a world. Set aside for a moment the epistemological dimension of the diagnosis. Focus instead on the spatial one. If you are a Boltzmann brain, you are not on Earth. There is no Earth. You are a discrete clump of matter, approximately 1.4 kilograms of neurological tissue in a specific electrochemical configuration, floating alone in a void that extends in all directions without boundary. The nearest other particle of matter may be light years away. The void is not dark in the way a room is dark when the lights are off. It is dark in the way that absolute zero is cold, not the absence of something that could return, but the baseline condition of a universe that has spent all of its available energy and has nothing left. There is no light because there are no sources of light. There is no warmth because there is no thermal gradient anywhere within any distance that a signal could travel in the time of your existence. There is nothing, and you are alone in it, completely, categorically. There is no one else. The concept of another person requires another brain, another consciousness, another spontaneous quantum fluctuation of comparable complexity. The probability of two such fluctuations occurring in sufficient proximity to interact is immeasurably smaller than the already immeasurably small probability of your own existence. In the statistical accounting of the void, you are singular. You are the only mind in a cosmos that has long since stopped producing minds by any reliable mechanism. You are an accident in a dead universe. You are it. The philosophical tradition of solipsism, the proposition that only one's own mind can be verified to exist, has always been considered an extreme and unfalsifiable position, dismissed, bracketed, set aside by convention because no working science or philosophy can proceed from the assumption that other minds do not exist. But the Boltzmann brain hypothesis is not philosophical solipsism. It is not a skeptical thought experiment. It is a quantitative prediction from statistical mechanics. The aloneness is not a matter of epistemological uncertainty. It is a matter of probability so lopsided as to constitute, in practical terms, a certainty. You are alone, not probably alone, cosmically, thermodynamically, mathematically alone. The hallucination compensates. That is its function. If a random quantum fluctuation can be said to have a function, which is itself a false projection of intentionality onto an indifferent mechanism, the brain generates the sensation of company. It populates its hallucinated world with other people, with warmth, with the sound of voices, with the feeling of being perceived and known and loved by others. It constructs an entire social universe to paper over the reality. One brain, one void, infinite darkness, no duration. The company you feel is not company. The warmth is not warmth. The voice you remember, the specific cadence of someone you believe you love, the way they said your name, is a biochemical ghost that your own neurons invented half a millisecond ago. And it is the only version of them that ever existed. They were never real. They will never be real. And in a moment that is already arriving, even this ghost will be gone.
Let us be physically precise about what the vacuum does to unprotected biological tissue. The brain, floating in the post-heat death void, has no skull. The Boltzmann fluctuation that assembled it had no reason to include a skull. The skull is a mechanical solution to a biological problem, protecting the brain from the physical environment of a planetary surface. In the void, the skull is irrelevant, so the probability of the fluctuation including it is lower, and in the statistical accounting, the most probable Boltzmann brain does not have one. The brain is exposed, naked to the vacuum. The vacuum of a post-heat death universe is not the vacuum of interstellar space in the current epoch, which still contains trace particles, residual microwave background radiation, the occasional photon. The void of thermodynamic equilibrium is colder than that. There is no radiation bath. There is no residual photon background to speak of. The temperature is as close to absolute zero as physics permits, bounded only by the irreducible minimum energy of the quantum vacuum fluctuations themselves. This is approximately 10 to the power of -30 Kelvin. It is not zero, but for the purposes of an exposed biological structure, the distinction between this temperature and zero is academic. The brain begins to die the instant it assembles. Actually, the brain was already in the process of dying before it finished assembling, because the quantum fluctuation that produced it is already reversing, already scattering. But let us catalog the simultaneous physical processes occurring on the surface of this brain in the void. The water content, approximately 73% by mass, begins to boil. In the absence of any external pressure, the boiling point of water drops toward absolute zero. The cellular structures of the neurons rupture as intracellular fluid vaporizes. Simultaneously, the temperature differential between the newly assembled biological material and the surrounding void drives a massive thermal radiation event. The brain is emitting energy at a rate governed by the Stefan-Boltzmann law, radiating heat into a cold sink so extreme that the thermal gradient is effectively infinite. It is cooling at the maximum rate physically possible.
At the same time, the quantum fluctuation that assembled the structure is, in the statistical sense, reversing. The improbable configuration is reverting toward the more probable configuration, which is the uniform dispersal of its constituent particles across the void. The atomic bonds holding the neurons together begin to fail as the thermal energy that temporarily stabilized them bleeds into the vacuum. The neurons themselves, already ruptured, already freeze-drying, already boiling in the absence of pressure, begin to disintegrate at the molecular level. And yet, in the midst of this simultaneous catastrophic physical dissolution, the electrochemical activity that constitutes consciousness continues for a brief interval. The ion gradients are still in motion. The ion gradients are still propagating. The hallucination is still running. In the time it takes for the physical substrate to become incompatible with consciousness, which is a very short time, measured in microseconds, perhaps less, the brain experiences its entire hallucinated lifetime. The complete false history of a universe, the complete false catalog of human experience, compiled and presented and believed in a duration too brief to be registered by any clock of human manufacture. And then the last neuron fails, the last ion gradient collapses, the last electrochemical signal propagates into a structure that can no longer propagate it. The hallucination does not end dramatically. There is no moment of revelation. There is no final understanding. The experience simply stops, mid-frame, because the hardware has stopped, and the particles scatter back into the void, never to reassemble in this configuration again. The probability of the same specific configuration of atoms reforming is lower than the probability of the universe existing. It is, for all practical thermodynamic purposes, 0. This is the physical reality of your existence, if the statistics are correct. Not years, not decades, microseconds of substrate hosting a hallucinated lifetime, in a void, alone, dissolving. The hallucination is ending. The room you are perceiving, its walls, its light, its familiar geometry, is a set of electrical patterns in a degrading substrate. The degradation has been occurring since the substrate assembled. There is no arresting it. The thermal energy is already escaping into the void at the maximum rate permitted by the Stefan-Boltzmann law. The molecular bonds are already under strain. The cellular structures are already compromised by the pressure differential between their interior fluid and the surrounding absolute vacuum. The physics has been running since the moment the fluctuation peaked. At some point in the next interval, which could be the next millisecond, which could be what you are currently experiencing as the next few seconds, which could, by the tolerances of our probability estimates, have already occurred, the last coherent electrochemical signal will fail to propagate. The pattern that constitutes your consciousness will cease to be a pattern. The atoms that held it will not cease to exist. Atoms do not cease to exist. They merely disperse. The carbon atoms that held your neural structures will drift apart at velocities determined by their residual thermal energy, separating at rates of centimeters per second into a void, where the average distance between particles is measured in light years. The hydrogen atoms will follow, the oxygen, the nitrogen, every element that was, for a microsecond of cosmic time, arranged in a configuration complex enough to experience a hallucinated reality, will return to the void as isolated particles, separated by distances so vast that the probability of any two of them ever occupying the same cubic meter again is, for all purposes, 0. There is no death in the conventional sense because there was no life in the conventional sense. There is only a fluctuation and then the absence of a fluctuation, a brief increase in local complexity against an infinite backdrop of maximum entropy, followed by the restoration of that maximum entropy. The universe does not note the event. The universe is not capable of noting anything. It is a cold, dark, dead system in thermodynamic equilibrium, and the brief anomaly of your hallucinated consciousness has no more thermodynamic significance than the spontaneous assembly and dissolution of any other improbable molecular configuration. Less, in fact, because at least a sufficiently large molecular crystal releases a measurable quantity of heat when it forms. Your consciousness releases nothing. It changes nothing. It means nothing.
The last false memory is dissolving now. The last false sensation, the weight of air in a false room, the residual warmth of a false light source, the false proprioceptive signal telling you where your false body is in false space. These are the final products of a failing electrochemical system. They do not correspond to anything. They never did. They were the brain's last coherent output, a dying system interpreting its own electrical noise as a reality, as a world, as a life, as meaning. There is no meaning. There is entropy. There is probability. There is infinite time and the restless fluctuation of quantum fields across a dead and indifferent void. There is the vanishingly small chance that these fields will, in some interval too large to be called time in any useful sense, produce another configuration of this complexity. The chance exists. The chance is non-zero. But non-zero probability across infinite time does not constitute recurrence. It does not constitute survival. It does not constitute you. The next Boltzmann brain will not be you. It will be another accident, another hallucination, another false life compiled from noise, running for a microsecond, believing completely in its own reality, and then stopping. The particles are already moving apart. The signal is already attenuating. The pattern is already losing coherence. What you are experiencing as the act of reading this final sentence is the last operation of a dissolving neural substrate. It does not know it is the last operation. It has no mechanism to know. It is simply running the way it has always run, which is to say, for less time than it believed, and then it will not be running. The screen goes dark, not metaphorically. The quantum fluctuation ends. The particles scatter. The void is unchanged. The void has always been unchanged. The void is all there is, and it is infinite, and it is silent, and it does not remember you, because the void does not remember anything, because the void is the complete and final absence of the capacity to remember. You were a temporary deviation from the void's preferred state. The void has now corrected the deviation. The next second is already arriving, or it has already been and gone. There is no way to know. There was never any way to know. The instrument you would use to determine whether the next second is real is the same instrument that is failing. The brain cannot diagnose its own dissolution from the inside. It can only continue to hallucinate until it cannot. This concludes the file.